A lone cicada hums in the Alabama heat as a man stands at the edge of a collapsing world. His name is Jonas Reddick, a plantation heir who has inherited nothing but debt, dying soil, and the echo of choices made long before he was born. 2 short breaths, and then a long one he doesn't want to take, because he knows that every step he makes from this moment forward will drag him deeper into a secret history the South never wanted written. He carries a leather journal, its edges frayed, its ink fading, its truth still burning. Inside it lies a name, crossed out again and again, as if the writer was trying to erase a man from existence. But no matter how hard he pressed the pen, the name kept resurfacing, like guilt clawing back from the grave. And as Jonas flips that journal open under the dying sun, you can almost feel the question rising in your own chest. What was buried out here, and why did every man connected to it die protecting the lie? Before we dive deeper, do something simple. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoy stories that feel like peeling back the floorboards of forgotten history. It helps the channel more than you think, and it tells me you want more long-form cinematic deep dives like this. And drop a quick comment. Just tell me where you're watching from. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. All right, take a breath, because the next part gets darker. The Alabama sun crawled across the sky like a slow-burning fuse, cutting through the haze that blanketed the Reddick estate. Jonas stood beneath the scorched oak, feeling the soil crack beneath his boots. 2 crows circled overhead, their shadows skimming the barn roof like restless ghosts. Inside, dust hung in thick bands of light, illuminating old tools and fragments of a world that refused to die quietly. Jonas lifted the rusted latch on a cedar chest, its hinges screaming like something that didn't want to be remembered. Inside, beneath brittle deeds and folded ledgers, he found the journal. The cover was stiff and warped with age, marked by a crude emblem burned into the leather, a family crest whose meaning had long been lost in whispers and shame. Jonas ran his thumb over the scar. The pages crackled as he opened them, the faint scent of tobacco and sweat lingering like ghosts of men who'd once believed themselves immortal. The handwriting was heavy, deliberate, each stroke weighed down by guilt. March 2nd, 1847, it read, "The deal is set. I've traded a soul for legacy. God forgive me if he still listens to men like me." Jonas exhaled slowly, the air thick with dread. He could almost see the man writing it, Trent Reddick, his great-grandfather sitting under candlelight, counting debts and plotting salvation through the ruin of others. The name itself carried the kind of authority that crushed people silently. Outside, a distant rumble of thunder crawled across the fields. Jonas turned the page. There were sketches of men, farmhands, overseers, clerks, each face rendered with meticulous care, as if identity was the only currency left. Then came a single name, Caleb Ward. No title, no explanation. Just a man's name, written 3 times, underlined with the kind of obsession that made the ink bleed. Jonas whispered it aloud. The sound of it felt wrong in his mouth. He didn't know why. He closed the journal and looked toward the horizon, where a half-broken fence divided what remained of the old cotton fields. Something waited there. Every man in Sumpter County knew the Reddick story, or thought they did. But there was a version nobody told aloud, one that smelled of blood and old paper. Jonas felt the pull to uncover it completely. He spent that night in his late father's study, where every clock had stopped the day he died. The air was heavy with cigar smoke and silence. He placed the journal on the desk like an offering. Lightning cracked across the fields, momentarily reflecting in the glass frame of his father's portrait. Jonas saw the resemblance, the same hard jaw, the same haunted eyes. He wondered if guilt could be inherited. The next entries were even darker. March 12, 1847. Ward agreed to the exchange. He doesn't understand the full measure of it yet, but men like him rarely do until it's too late. Jonas's pulse quickened. What exchange? What price? The script grew erratic toward the page's end, ink blotted by trembling hands. The words "blood for name" repeated until they carved through the page. He heard the thunder again, closer this time, rolling like a warning. Outside, wind rattled the shutters. For a brief moment, Jonas thought he heard footsteps upstairs, measured, deliberate, impossible. He froze, holding his breath. The house creaked under the strain of the storm, but something about the rhythm felt human, purposeful. When it stopped, the silence pressed against his chest like a weight. Jonas turned back to the journal, needing distraction, needing truth. The next passage changed tone completely, colder, businesslike, written in another hand. Contract secured. Witness, M. Harlan, compensation 400, numbers, initials, transactions. The ink shifted from confession to ledger. Jonas flipped the page and a thin slip of parchment fell out, covered in faint blue signatures. It was brittle but legible. His eyes caught the line at the bottom. Union of Caleb Ward and Isaiah Reddick. Sanctioned, witnessed, sealed. The handwriting was the same as his great-grandfather's. Jonas's breath left him in a slow, shaking exhale. Two men. A union written into law that should have never existed in that century. A bond created for inheritance, not affection. Jonas realized the deal wasn't business. It was bloodline manipulation, legacy through deception. He leaned back, his chair creaking. The storm raged against the house, rain clawing at the windows like fingernails. Somewhere in the thunder, he swore he heard laughter, a hollow echo from the past. He turned to another page. April 9th, 1847. Isaiah accepts the role. Poor boy thinks this will make him free. No man leaves my house without giving something of himself first. Jonas slammed the book shut, his pulse pounding in his ears. The words pulsed with cruelty, the kind of power born from desperation. He knew this tone. It ran through his family like rot in the wood. Lightning split the horizon again, revealing the skeletal outline of the fields beyond. Every stalk of cotton looked like a grave marker. Jonas stood, gripping the journal tighter, the pages whispering like restless spirits. He needed to know who Isaiah was. He needed to understand why Caleb Ward's name appeared in a family contract. Because if the bloodlines were intertwined, that meant his own existence was part of the lie. He opened an old filing drawer, pulling out records his father had hidden, birth logs, debt ledgers, plantation inventories, and there it was. Isaiah Reddick, listed property, not kin. The paper trembled in his grip. Jonas felt the world tilt. He realized his family's empire, their legacy, their very name, was built on falsified blood. The heirs of Reddick were born from the manipulation of men treated as signatures, not souls. He sank into the chair, rain hammering the windows harder now. His reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, a man staring back with his lineage cracking beneath him. Truth had weight, and it was crushing. Outside, a figure appeared by the barn. A shadow, tall, unmoving, silhouetted against lightning. Jonas blinked, and it was gone. The storm hissed, whispering like the journal's pages turning on their own. He pressed his hand against the cover. The leather felt warmer now, pulsing faintly as if the memory inside it still lived. He whispered to no one, "What did you do, Trent?" And then came the final line of that night's entry, written faintly, almost fading into the paper. He knows now. If he speaks, we all fall. Jonas's throat tightened as he read it aloud. He looked toward the portrait again. For the first time, he noticed a second shadow painted faintly behind his great-grandfather's shoulder. Another man, half erased, like history, trying to hide its accomplice. Jonas closed the journal gently, the candlelight flickering. He knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere between truth and inheritance, between guilt and redemption, there was a man who'd been erased. Tomorrow, he would find him. even if it meant digging up every grave with his family's name carved on it. Because once you open a forgotten man's journal, you don't just read history, you wake it. And somewhere beyond the thunder, a voice whispered his name. The morning after the storm, Jonas walked through the mist that clung to the earth like memory refusing to leave. Each step cracked damp twigs, echoing across the abandoned plantation. The journal weighed heavy. He reached the old smokehouse, where men once gathered to speak in hushed tones about debts and labor. The air still smelled faintly of char and iron. On the table, initials were carved deep, TR and CW. He traced the letters with one calloused fingertip. Trent Reddick, Caleb Ward. The names pulsed like open wounds through the decades. Somewhere between them, a contract had been written that condemned generations to silence. Jonas found a hidden panel beneath the table, loose enough to pry open. Inside, folded in wax paper, lay another set of documents. The ink was brittle, but the words still struck like confession. "Bond of Union," the header read. Beneath it, two signatures, Trent's bold, confident script and Caleb's careful, uncertain scrawl. A witness mark followed, belonging to a man named Eli Harlan. Jonas's pulse thudded in his ears. The language was cold, legal, written in the tone of ownership disguised as duty. The parties herein agree to the production of lineage through oath and servitude. Jonas clenched his jaw, feeling the bile rise. Caleb Ward had been trapped by desperation. A former clerk stripped of property and freedom, he had accepted Trent's offer for one reason: survival. But the cost had been something no man should bear. Jonas read further, the lines trembling beneath the candlelight. "Upon completion of lineage, the servant shall receive release and land parcel." A lie dressed in ink and wax seal. The same cruelty disguised as generosity. Outside, thunder grumbled again, though no storm gathered. Jonas closed the document and stared into the fogged glass window. His reflection looked older, the weight of discovery pressing deep behind his eyes. He needed more. He needed voices. So he rode into town, journal in his satchel, hat low over his brow. The road wound through skeletal trees, each branch scratching the dawn with ghostly fingers. At the county archive, a single clerk named Martin sat behind a counter piled high with yellowed papers. The man looked up, his beard silvered, eyes sunken with decades of keeping secrets. Jonas nodded once. "I'm looking for records," Jonas said. "Contracts between Trent Reddick and a man named Caleb Ward." Martin hesitated, the silence stretching like drawn breath. His fingers tapped the desk, slow, deliberate. "Those papers were sealed," he murmured. "Some deals aren't meant to be reopened." Jonas leaned forward, the journal thudding softly as he placed it on the desk. "I already opened it." Martin's eyes flickered with unease. He studied Jonas's face, then the old emblem on the journal. "You're one of them," he said quietly. "I figured this day would come." He reached for a key. He disappeared into the back room, the sound of drawers sliding open and metal locks clicking in sequence. When he returned, he carried a box, small enough to hold but heavy with consequence. He placed it before Jonas without a word. Inside were ledgers, letters, and one sealed envelope marked "Private," to be destroyed. Jonas broke the wax seal with trembling hands and unfolded the contents. The letter was addressed to Eli Harlan. The first line froze Jonas cold. The arrangement must remain undisputed. Should the servant protest, ensure his silence by whatever means are necessary. Signed, Trent Reddick. Jonas's stomach turned. Beneath the elegant handwriting was another note, hurried and panicked. "He found out. He knows the papers are false. I'm leaving tonight. Burn everything." It wasn't Trent's script. It was Caleb's. A sound escaped Jonas's throat, half disbelief, half grief. He looked up at Martin. Was there ever a record of him leaving? Martin shook his head slowly. Men like that didn't leave. They vanished. Jonas gathered the letter, the documents, and the journal. He could feel the edges of the story closing in, the walls of history tightening like a noose. Every truth he uncovered demanded another. By nightfall, he was back at the estate, the wind howling through cracked shutters. He laid the documents out across the table, aligning dates, names, and witness marks like solving a ghost's riddle. There was one constant through every record: Eli Harlan. His name appeared again and again, always at the periphery, always the witness, never the accused. Jonas realized Harlan had been the machine's quiet operator. He opened a drawer in the desk and found an old photograph. 3 men standing beside a carriage, hats low, expressions unreadable. Written on the back: Trent, Caleb, Eli. Summer, 1847. Proof of conspiracy. Jonas studied their faces. Trent's pride radiated even in stillness. Caleb's eyes looked hollow, defeated. But Eli's gaze followed the camera with the cold intelligence of a man who survives every purge. A loose floorboard creaked beneath Jonas's feet. He knelt, pried it up, and found a rusted tin box hidden beneath. Inside, another piece of parchment: Harlan Estate, witness payment record, blood money ledger. Each name listed a corresponding payment date, each marked fulfilled. The final line was Caleb Ward's. Next to it, no amount, just one word scrawled violently in ink: dead. Jonas's pulse roared. He leaned back against the desk, the storm's wind howling through the gaps in the wood. The house seemed to breathe, as if every beam carried the weight of men who'd bartered their souls. Jonas turned to the final page of the ledger, a note written sideways in faded pencil. He's buried beneath the east oak. No marker, no peace. The handwriting matched his great-grandfather's. He felt the chill before he moved. Every instinct told him to stop, but curiosity is stronger than caution. He grabbed a lantern, pulled on his coat, and stepped into the wet night. The east oak loomed at the edge of the property, its branches sprawling like the arms of something ancient. Rain dripped from the leaves, the soil soft beneath his boots. Jonas set down the light. He dug with his hands first, then with a rusted spade he found near the fence. Each scoop of mud released a damp, earthy stench that clung to him like guilt. The lantern flickered. After what felt like hours, the spade struck wood. Jonas froze. He brushed away mud until a wooden lid emerged, small, crude, hand-built. His fingers trembled as he lifted it open. Inside lay bones, brittle and pale beneath the lantern's glow. But resting on the rib cage was something unexpected: a tarnished silver badge engraved with the initials E.H., Eli Harlan's mark. Jonas stumbled backward, the wind whipping his coat. If Eli's remains were buried here, then who had continued signing his name in documents months after his death? A forged witness or a living ghost? The journal in his coat pocket seemed to thrum with warmth. He pulled it out, flipping to the last written line from Trent's hand. The witness will remain until the end. He stared at the oak, breath catching. The end hadn't come yet. There was another man, someone who had carried the lie forward long after death had taken its makers. Someone alive. Jonas extinguished the lantern and stood in the dark, rain washing over him. The truth wasn't buried. It was waiting, and now it had recognized him as part of its bloodline. He whispered to the night, voice trembling, "This isn't over." Somewhere behind him, deep in the empty house, a door creaked open. The sound echoed once, then silence claimed the fields again. The courthouse rose from the earth like a monument built to contain guilt itself. Morning fog wrapped around its columns, and Jonas stood before it, journal in hand, heartbeat steady, purpose absolute. Inside, the air carried that old scent of ink and sweat, men's voices bouncing off the walls like echoes from another century. Every bench creaked beneath the weight of those who'd come to witness reckoning. At the front sat Judge Marin, a man carved from the same stone as the courthouse. His jaw rigid, his eyes colder than morning iron. Beside him, two clerks whispered, already weary of ghosts. Jonas entered quietly, his boots leaving faint prints on the worn floorboards. The bailiff, a grizzled man named Turner, gave him a single nod of recognition. Everyone in town knew the Reddick bloodline. Everyone remembered. He took a seat at the back as the first witness prepared to speak. The name called broke through the tension like lightning. Thomas Ward. Jonas froze. A descendant. Caleb's blood survived after all. Thomas stepped forward, lean and weathered, his eyes burning with something between fear and fury. "I came because the truth deserves air," he said. His voice carried the weight of every man who'd suffered in silence. On the table before him lay a ledger, brittle and gray. He opened it with careful fingers. "My grandfather died under Reddick hands," he said. The papers said accident. The ground told a different story. Jonas watched, pulse hammering. The court murmured. Judge Marin leaned forward. "You have evidence?" Thomas nodded, sliding the ledger closer. "Burial maps, dates, payment records, signatures forged by men who thought names could erase sin." He pointed toward Jonas. "His family's ink," Thomas said quietly. "Every lie, every stolen inheritance tied to that journal he carries." All eyes turned. Jonas stood, jaw clenched, refusing to flinch beneath their gaze. "I didn't create this," Jonas said evenly, "but I'll finish it." His voice steadied, echoing through the chamber. The judge's gavel cracked once, demanding order that could no longer exist. Next came Sheriff Hale, old, stooped, his hands trembling from memory. "I remember Trent Reddick," he rasped. "He thought he could buy loyalty the way he bought silence, but even money rots with time." He lifted a faded sheet from the evidence pile. "These were found in the county vault. Wills rewritten, names replaced, witnesses multiplied like weeds. And at the center, always Eli Harlan's signature." Jonas's chest tightened. The man buried under the oak had signed documents months after his death. The fraud had lived longer than its maker. The courthouse walls seemed to hum with the realization. The prosecutor, a wiry man named Jensen, rose next. "These aren't coincidences," he said. "They're architecture, built lies stacked high enough to touch law itself. The Reddick name isn't legacy, it's construction." A low murmur rolled through the gallery. Men shifted uneasily, eyes darting toward Jonas, toward the family crest carved into the floor. He didn't move. He felt every gaze like the weight of judgment. The next document slid across the table. A contract sealed in 1847, same ink, same language of ownership. It named not just Trent, but every man who'd carried the lie afterward, keeping the ghost alive. Judge Marin rubbed his temple, exhaustion leaking into authority. "We aren't here to retry the dead," he said. "We're here to understand what they built and whether we still live inside it." Silence answered. Jonas stepped forward, journal in hand. "My father burned these pages once," he said. "Said the past should stay quiet. But quiet's just another word for rot. I'm here to clean what they left." He opened the journal to the entry marked, "The witness will remain until the end." The ink shimmered faintly under courthouse light, as if alive. Men leaned forward, drawn by something older than justice. "It's not just blood," Jonas continued. "It's belief. They made themselves gods of paper, thinking a man's worth could be signed away. They forgot time keeps its own records." His voice wavered, steadying on conviction. From the back, an old man rose, Harlan's grandson, face gaunt, eyes hollow. "My grandfather didn't forge alone," he said. "He was forced, threatened. Trent held his debts like chains. Every signature cost him another day alive." He placed a rusted pocket watch on the table. This was found buried with him. The initials EH glimmered faintly. He left it for anyone brave enough to tell what happened after ink dried. The judge leaned forward. "And what happened?" The old man's voice cracked. "They turned witnesses into ghosts. My grandfather signed his own silence." The courtroom fell still, the air too heavy to breathe. Jonas felt something fracture inside him. Not shame, but inheritance, breaking apart. He turned toward the judge. "You wanted to know what they built? They built men who'd rather lie than starve. That's the foundation." Jensen, the prosecutor, whispered to his aide. "Every record matches," he said. "Every false seal. Every fabricated oath." He raised his eyes toward Jonas. "You understand what this means for your name?" Jonas nodded slowly. "Names don't matter. What matters is whether we still let ghosts write the law." He closed the journal, its edges smoldering faintly like fire waiting for breath. Outside, thunder broke again, though the sky remained clear. The courthouse windows rattled as if the past itself clawed for entry. Judge Marin struck the gavel once, but sound could not silence legacy. He stood. "This county will know truth," he declared, "even if it breaks us." The echo of his voice carried out the doors, down the streets, through every cracked foundation built on silence. Jonas stepped outside, the wind cutting through his coat. Behind him, the courthouse bell rang once, then again, as if tolling for every man who'd buried himself beneath false oaths. At the base of the steps, Thomas Ward waited. He extended a hand. "My grandfather deserved peace," he said. Jonas took it, their palms rough with generations of labor and loss. The sun began to break through cloud, thin and pale. Jonas looked toward it, feeling the weight lift slightly from his chest. The truth had been spoken, but redemption would demand something more. He turned back toward the horizon where the Reddick estate stood, still and silent. He knew the final piece of this story waited there, the last man connected to every buried sin. The storm wasn't finished. The trial had cracked the seal, but the truth still needed its final witness. And Jonas, now fully awake to his inheritance, knew he would find him before nightfall. The wind rose, scattering old papers across the courthouse steps. The words on them blurred in the light, but one phrase remained visible before vanishing into the dust. "No man leaves without giving something." Jonas whispered it once, like an oath and a warning. Then he mounted his horse and rode toward the east, the sound of hooves echoing through the bones of a county, learning how to remember. Dawn crept slowly across the fields, painting the sky in shades of gray and ash. Jonas rode through the fog, his breath misting in the cold air, the journal pressed tight against his chest. The Reddick estate appeared on the horizon, a skeleton of its former self. The windows were black, the chimneys cold. The house loomed like a confession that had waited too long to be spoken. He dismounted, boots sinking into soft earth. Every step toward the porch sounded like an echo of those who came before, Trent, Caleb, Eli, all reduced to whispers and bones beneath the same soil. Inside, the air was thick with dust and regret. The hallway stretched endlessly, portraits of grim-faced men watching with eyes that no longer held power, only warning. Jonas passed them without flinching. He reached the study. Papers still littered the desk where generations had measured worth by signatures. The journal felt heavier now, as though it knew its final page was waiting to be written. He set it down beside an oil lamp, its flame struggling against the morning light. Then he noticed the door behind the bookshelf, slightly ajar, hidden by shadow. Something inside whispered of unfinished truths. Jonas pulled the shelf aside, its hinges groaning like tired lungs. The door opened into a narrow passage lined with stone. Air drifted up, cold and metallic, like breath exhaled by the earth itself. He descended slowly, lantern in hand. The passage curved downward until it opened into a small chamber. There, under flickering light, sat a single chair, and a man waiting in silence. The figure was old, his beard gray, his clothes worn but clean. His eyes lifted slowly to meet Jonas's. "I was wondering when one of you would come back," he said, voice quiet, steady. Jonas froze. "Who are you?" The old man smiled faintly. "Elias Reddick," he said. "Trent's last surviving son, the one no record ever dared name." His tone carried both pride and exhaustion. Jonas's pulse thundered. "That's impossible. He had no other sons." Elias leaned forward. "Not in ink, no. But men like him made heirs the way they made deals, hidden, conditional, and soaked in deceit." He reached into his coat and drew out a folded paper, yellowed by time. "This was my father's last decree," he said, "the one that damned him and freed me in the same stroke." Jonas took it, unfolding the brittle page. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Elias will inherit what remains, but he must ensure the silence of those who came before." Signed, Trent Reddick. The words stung like poison. "You kept the silence," Jonas said. Elias nodded. "For decades. Until I realized silence isn't peace, it's rot wearing patience." His gaze sharpened. "You're the one holding the journal. I've waited for you." Jonas felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Why me?" Elias leaned back. "Because you're the first Reddick to ask why instead of how much. Every generation before you chose profit over penance." He stood slowly, his frame fragile but unbroken. "I was there when Caleb Ward died," he said. "I buried him with my own hands. Father said it was mercy. I called it execution." Jonas's breath caught. "So the story's true." Elias nodded. Every word, the fraud, the forged vows, the false witness, it was all designed to preserve the illusion that Reddicks were noble men. He stepped closer, eyes glinting with old sorrow. "But nobility built on deceit rots from within. You've seen it. The land dying, the name collapsing, the ghosts clawing at the walls." Jonas looked down at the journal. "Then what's left?" Elias exhaled, slow and tired. "Truth. But truth has a cost. Once spoken, it burns everything still standing. Are you ready to live in ashes?" Jonas didn't answer. The silence between them stretched like a chasm. The lantern flickered, shadows bending across their faces until they looked like reflections of the same man divided by time. Finally, Jonas said, "Yes." Elias smiled faintly. "Then you'll need this." He reached into a small chest and withdrew a second journal, nearly identical to the first. The ledger of the witness. Jonas opened it. Inside were confessions written in multiple hands. Harlan, Caleb, even Trent. Names, dates, payments, acts of cruelty meticulously recorded. Each line another weight pressing down on the Reddick legacy. He closed the book. "Why didn't you destroy this?" Elias's eyes dimmed. "Because truth isn't meant to disappear. It's meant to wait until someone brave enough will face it without looking away." Outside, thunder cracked, though the sky was clear. Jonas realized it wasn't thunder. It was the old foundation shifting, groaning beneath the weight of generations. The past was collapsing in on itself. Elias turned toward the stone wall. "Behind this," he said, tapping gently, "lies everything we tried to hide. Documents, names, relics, the last pieces of the lie. Burn them or bury them. Your choice." Jonas stepped forward, pressing his palm against the cold surface. The stones moved slightly, revealing a hidden vault filled with chests, scrolls, and rusted lockboxes, centuries of stolen truth stacked like bones. For a long time, neither man spoke. The air vibrated with something heavy and ancient. Jonas whispered, "If I burn it, history ends. If I keep it, the curse continues." Elias nodded. "Now you understand." Jonas lifted a lantern from the wall. The flame trembled in his hand. "What would you do?" Elias smiled softly. "I've already lived with the ghosts. It's your turn to choose how you'll die with them." Jonas set the lantern down beside the nearest chest. The flame licked higher, devouring dust and paper. Fire spread slowly, then hungrily, consuming the vault's dark heart. Elias watched, unflinching. Smoke curled upward, carrying centuries of lies into the air. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder, silent witnesses to the end of everything their family had built and buried. As the fire raged, Elias turned. "Every man leaves something behind," he said. "Some leave names, others leave truth. Decide which one you'll be." He stepped back into the shadows and was gone. Jonas watched until the flames reached the ceiling. The heat burned his face, but he didn't move. He felt lighter, hollowed out, like a vessel emptied of every inherited sin. He climbed the stairs slowly. When he reached the surface, dawn had broken wide open. The house behind him smoldered, the air alive with ash and freedom. For the first time, silence felt honest. He turned toward the horizon where the fields shimmered in gold. No ghosts, no lies, only earth waiting to be reborn. The journal's ashes clung to his hands like proof of absolution. Jonas whispered to the wind, "It ends here." The sun caught his face, lighting every scar and shadow. In that moment, he was no longer a Reddick. He was the last man standing,